So the Venn diagram shows the probabilities associated with 4 events, A, B, C and D. And part A says we need to write down any pair of mutually exclusive events from A, B, C and D. So firstly, we're going to define mutually exclusive. So we say event 1 and event 2 are mutually exclusive if they can't happen at the same time. So we can use the Venn diagram up here to work out which out of A, B, C and D are mutually exclusive by looking at where there's no intersection. So for example, A and B aren't mutually exclusive because they intersect here, so they could happen at the same time. Because this here is a probability of A and B. However, look at this, A and C are mutually exclusive because there's no overlapping part, so they can't happen at the same time. So one of the things we can write down is A and C. Okay, so D and C don't overlap at all, so we can write down those as well. Or also D and B don't overlap at all either, so we could also have that. And we'll get 1 mark in the mark scheme for any of those pairs. So we'd only need one of these to get the mark. So moving on, we're now given that the probability of B is 0.4. And now we need to find the value of P, and this is for 1 mark. So looking up at the diagram here, we've got the probability of B, so the probability of all of this is 0.4. And the probabilities that make up B are 0.24, 0.07 and P. And given that the probability of B is 0.4, we know that 0.24 plus 0.07 plus P equals 0.4. Then rearranging that, we can say, okay, so then P equals 0.4 minus 0.24 minus 0.07. Which gives us 0.09 as the final answer. So we just get 1 mark for getting the correct answer of 0.09. So moving on to part C now, we're given that A and B are independent. And part C says we need to find the value of Q. This is for 2 marks. So we can use the fact that if A and B are independent, the probability of A and B is the probability of A multiplied by the probability of B. And because we know it says in the question that A and B are independent, we know that this must be true. So we know the probability of A and B. And look up at the Venn diagram here, we see, okay, so here we've got A, here we've got B. So the probability of A and B is this part here, so 0.24. And we know the probability of B is 0.4 because we were told that previously. Therefore, we can say, okay, so 0.24 is going to equal the probability of A multiplied by the probability of B, which is 0.4. So the probability of A equals 0.24 divided by 0.4. Which equals 0.6. And then from that, okay, so we now need to work out what Q is. So the probability of A is going to be 0.24 plus 0.16 plus Q. And we know the probability of A equals 0.6. So we could then say that we know that 0.24 plus 0.16 plus Q must equal 0.6. So then it will follow that Q equals 0.6. Take away 0.24, take away 0.16, so then Q will equal 0.20, and that is the final answer there. So looking where we get the marks, we get 1 mark for this line here, and then we get the second and final mark for the value of Q. So now we're given further that the probability of not B, given that C, equals 0.64. And part D says we need to find, firstly the value of R, and then the value of S, and this is for 4 marks. So referencing the formula for conditional probability in the formula booklet, we can write out that the probability of not B given that C is the probability of the intersection between C and not B all over the probability of C. So we want to see what this equals. So we've got the probability of C intersection not B. So we're going to look at the diagram and see if we can work that out. So what we're going to be looking at is this area here. So as you can see, we've got C here. And it's where it intersects not B. So not B is anything that's not this area here. Well, the bit where not B and C intersect is this area here. And we see the probability of that is just R. So we can say, okay, so this is going to be R, all divided by. Now we've got the probability of C. And the probability of C here is just going to be P plus R. We know up here that this equals 0.64. So we say, okay then, so therefore 0.64 equals R all divided by P plus R. And in the previous part we found out that P equals 0.09, we got that 0.64 equals R all divided by 0.09 plus R. So this is great. To work out the value of r, we just need to rearrange this and make r the subject. So first, if I multiply through by the denominator, we're at 0.64 multiplied by 0.09 plus r is going to equal r. So we're then going to have, if we multiply out these brackets, we're going to have 0.64 multiplied by 0.09, which is 0.0576. Then multiplying through the 0.64 and the r, we have plus 0.64r, and that equals r. So from that, if we take away 0.64r from both sides, we're going to get the 0.36r equals 0.0576. And lastly, dividing through by 0.36, we're going to get that r equals 0.16. Great, so now we've done the first part of D, we need to look at the second part as saying we need to find the value of S. We can use the fact that the sum of the probabilities here is going to equal 1. The sum of all the probabilities inside A, B, C and D here, plus S here, which is outside, is going to equal 1. And we could write this in a couple of different ways, but we know the value of the probability of B because we've given it here. So we say, okay, so we're going to have 0.4 plus. So we've already catered for all of this. So we're going to have to add r to cater for this part here. And we know that r is 0.16. Then what we've got left, okay, so we've got left this part here. So that's 0.16 plus q. And because q is 0.20, we have 0.16 plus 0.20, which is going to be 0.36. And then lastly, we've got s, so it's just going to be add s equals 1. So rearranging that, we're going to have s equals 1 minus 0.4 minus 0.16 minus 0.36. So therefore s equals 0.08. And that is the final answer. So in this question we get 1 mark for this line here, so working out that we can write it as r all over p plus r. And then we get a second mark for getting down to r equals 0.16. We get a third mark for realising in this part that the sum of probabilities equals 1. And then the final and fourth mark for getting down to s equals 0.08.